Bike Shop Radio is a podcast that originates from 718 Cyclery in Brooklyn, New York. My name is Joe Nocella, former architect and owner of 718 Cyclery. We will discuss modern retail trends, the bike industry, and life in and around our vibrant shop. We focus on content and interest, not recording technology and slick editing. Our stories might happen in our loud shop, on the louder streets of Brooklyn, or out in the country on a bike camping trip. There might be sirens or Van Halen in the background, so be prepared. Thank you for taking the time to listen this far. I hope we can entertain you for the remainder of the episode.
We're about to get inundated with Joe Namath in about a month. He wrote a book. He wrote his first autobiography.
Talking about Joe Namath. Wait, Joe Namath wrote his first autobiography?
There was a book about him.
Right. There's probably a lot of books about him.
He's got an autobiography coming out in May, and there's only one story I want to read about, which is his one-night stand with Janis Joplin. So, and I'm hoping that he puts it in the book. I think he will. He's talked about it before, about how it was so unforgettable to him. But can you imagine that? Can you imagine the conversation?
Well, there's full disclosure here. Yeah. I was actually named after Joe Namath. I was born right when they won the Super Bowl III. And my dad wanted to name me Joe Willie, and then my last name. And my mom kind of caught wind of who and why he was doing that and said no to the middle name part of it, not Joe Willie. So my first name is Joe after Joe Namath. My middle name is Edward for my father's name.
That's good.
And my house is painted jet green right now. I'm a long-time sufferer. I have not seen the Jets in the Super Bowl in my about to be 50-year life. I had a boss once who said, the whole theory about 1,000 monkeys typing for 1,000 years will eventually, type Shakespeare. There's only 32 teams in this league.
Doesn't apply.
So every 16 years, you would think the team would stumble into the Super Bowl backwards. I mean, I know all the championship game in '82 when the Dolphins didn't cover the field and left it wet for Freeman McNeil to slosh around.
Oh, Freeman McNeil.
Yeah. Underhanded Dolphins left the field wet, and the Jets lost the AFC Championship game that year.
I really wonder if we're going to see it in our lifetime. Do you know? I mean,
I've got 30 years left, I think, on this planet. I don't see it in the next 30 years.
I will say, when they talk about, most memorable Super Bowls and most memorable World Series, they tend to be the ones won by the teams that took forever to win. That's why, whenever they're ranking in baseball, greatest World Series ever, they'll always call up like the 69 series and the 86 series. Right. And we love them because they were Mets series, but it's because the desperation was so palpable with those teams. Like when the Cubs won it, people will always remember because it was
the Red Sox won it for the first time.
Right. These other things, all these Yankee ones, they're all interchangeable pretty much.
I always thought the Red Sox won when they won in 2004. I thought it was the worst thing they could ever do for their brand, because they had this whole lovable loser and this whole curse, and there was like this cottage industry of people writing books and Harvard dissertations. And then once they won that
curse,
and then once they won the World Series and then won it again, they just became another rich team that happened to buy into the World Series, just like the hated Yankees.
Right. No, that's absolutely true. I mean, sometimes I think, just to draw the comparison to football, it'd be cool if the Browns won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'd be behind that.
But at the same time, there's something about how could you not love their fans with the paper bags on their heads and stuff?
Right, if the Jets did win, I don't know if I'd like that. I don't know. Right, I remember what I'd do with myself.
When the Islanders won their first Stanley Cup, I remember sitting there crying because it almost felt like the quest was achieved and now it was over, and they were of course I was like, well, now they're going to just become so big that they're going to be the most popular team in the world, which of course it was the opposite.
They're going to have to break them up because they're going to win so many Stanley Cups. The league's going to have to step in and break them up.
And that's the common thing now, right? Especially in baseball where and football where the team gets broken up, or the guy who won the MVP of the thing gets kicked to the.
I remember when the Royals won a few years ago. I had a friend, maybe 2 years ago. I had some friends out in Kansas City because I went to grad school out that way. And I had said friends like, oh, no, this is a team. They're really about the community. They really care about the community. It's like a small market team wins a World Series, gets all excited, and that team got broken up right away.
Yeah, didn't they do that when St. Louis won too?
Yeah,
like
it's like oh, they're going to stay together because they really care about the community. These guys don't care, and they shouldn't care. They should follow the money. I mean, they should get as much as they possibly can because of being athletes. You have a very limited time.
You want to win.
Cash it in now.
You want to win. Those days of having some crusty old guy who's been with the team for 20 years, like
Paul Horning, he works as a substitute teacher in the off season.
Ed Kranepool, on the Mets.
Ed Kranepool.
Ed Kranepool's
Hold on, I want to stop. So hey, Adam, if you're listening, we're talking about old Mets stuff. So you're gonna love this Ed Kranepool thing. I don't know where it's going, but I don't know how many podcasts in our modern era mention Ed Kranepool, but here we go. Hope's got something to say.
Well, Ed Kranepool to me, he was just always there. Yeah. He never seemed to get traded. Never seemed to do anything really astounding. I don't even know if he ever made an All-Star team.
He's a backup first baseman in a way, in a lot of ways.
He was like a mascot.
Yeah.
Okay. He was just there, I never could. He was on the '69 team, right?
I couldn't pick him out of a crowd. I know the name like the back of my hand.
I remember he talked like this too. I think he had one of those accents. But he was just unexceptional, yet he managed to play. How long did he play for the team?
You're gonna look up
he was there
I don't
for usually
a long time.
Do this. Yeah, I think he was a lifetime Met. Where were they going to trade him? Where was he going to go? He was one of those guys that was meant not to be protected by the expansion. Yeah, Mets, 1962 to 1979. He was an all-star one time, 1965.
On the Mets from 62 to 79?
Yeah. They traded Tom Seaver and Ed Kranepool, Nolan Ryan, freaking Ken Singleton.
We have to hang on to Kranepool. Yeah. Whatever we do, trade Tom Seaver, but hang on to Kranepool.
Could you imagine all the guys they've traded, and this guy managed to somehow
a roster spot,
escape.
Just taking up a roster. He was on the major league roster the whole time. He wasn't in the minors. He was a major league ball player.
Right. He played with them during the darkest years. There's no question about it.
There's a lot of dark eras.
He hit a home run in the '69 series. Well, good for him. Okay, so I guess he'll be there for this year's celebration of the 50th anniversary.
Right. And getting back to the Jets, because the Jets did share a stadium with. Oh yeah. The Jets played at Shea for I think from '64 on, right? Because they played in the Polo Grounds like the Met. They were the Titans.
I
played in the Polo
into
Grounds.
The '80s there.
Well, they moved in '82, the '82 season. Cause I think Giant Stadium or the Meadowlands opened in '77 or '76 maybe, and the Giants moved there right away.
Right.
Out of Yankee Stadium. The Jets didn't move till '82, and '82 was a good season for them.
Right.
And I was thinking the other night, because I wanted to talk about this, but I was thinking about I was 12 in '82, and I don't remember consciously that move or that being a big deal in any way. I was just watching it on TV, and they just happened. I don't remember because we went to games. As a 12-year-old, I didn't understand what it meant to move away from Shea.
I think it was understood that it might be a temporary thing because I have vague recollections of oh wow, there's no teams in New York. Why are they still calling themselves New York? And all that stuff. And they used to practice at Hofstra on Island. We used to go watch them practice, and so they were kind of entrenched in that once again another thing entrenched in the Long Island.
Yeah.
I used the word culture on our last podcast, but I'm just going to say I don't know if culture is the right word.
It's more of a catch-all kind of word.
Yeah. That implies that there is culture. But when they moved, it was weird. It always and I'm still kind of I wish that there was a team in New York proper, like an actual team.
Football?
Yeah, football team. Like here in our vicinity.
Yeah, I don't need them here. Cool. I watch them on TV. I don't need them. They could wire it in from Reno if I had. I don't need to have them here because I don't feel there's any kind of connection. These are just kind of franchises with different colors that happen to be in Dallas or Kansas City. I don't feel.
I just don't like the sharing the stadium thing because I hate the Giants so much.
Yeah, I really of all the teams, and I don't hate. Hate's a tough word, and they're sports teams, and the guys on the team that I didn't like are way, way, way gone off of the team. The Giants. The Giants seem to have a bunch of likable guys now and a likable coach, but I just can't stand them. My vision of Giant fans, and I don't. It's very skewed and it's not realistic. I think of a Giant fan wearing a Giant sweater and drinking wine. I don't know why. Really? I think this really at the stadium. I just have this vision of Yankee and Giant fans. this old blood,
well, yeah, that was
old school, and the Jets and the Mets being this like jet age and the modern era, and all these like new jet set kind of things in the 60s and 70s, and the Giants and the Yankees just being like this old school stodgy, Wellington Mara, like the Mara family. It's just like
that's an interesting way to look at it. I never really looked at it like that. I always thought that because the Jets and the Mets were younger, they were not regarded as seriously. They were just kind of like these young whatever. But to me, there's more of a sad sack kind of thing attached to being a Mets and a Jets fan. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of it's geography. I grew up because obviously I grew up on Long Island, so the teams. Yeah. Were going to be the ones that were easiest to get to.
Yeah, so was right there.
Yeah, it was going to be the Mets and it was going to be the Jets. There was not really any question about that. Whereas the Yankees and the Giants far away.
But I remember going to the Jet games at Shea, and I remember like that they would pull these bleachers out to kind of like there were these temporary bleachers.
Yeah, I do.
To kind of almost square the field off in a way. Yeah. And I remember them like the shaking of like as people would jump up and down, this whole stadium would just rattle.
I do remember we talked about this about the football field when you went and it was still baseball season, the baseball diamond being in the field. Can you imagine them doing that now? I mean,
there's still some stadiums that have baseball diamonds like part of it. I think is Oakland now. There are some stadiums that have like that. It's so
funny to see it now, but yeah, and I always think too, like with Yankee fans, there's this attitude, this thing that exists when you go to a Met game. As much as I make fun of, I make fun of it all the time, but there's definitely more of a family environment at those games. But you also see these really old school fans.
Like
everybody seems like
the game life's
been tough. Life's been tough for them. They've got some like little Met gear on. There's just something very
maybe they're pulling a little oxygen tank.
Yeah, there's just something really kind of morose, and it's just like failures everywhere. But at the same time, that's why it means so much more when they win. I like had to be there to see R.A. Dickey win his 20th game. Mm-hmm. This was a few years ago, obviously, because that never happens. We'll always have this one player that's an absolute killer, like DeGrom now and stuff. So you savor those little things. They become really, really special. Anytime somebody does something special as a Met, they're eternally remembered.
Right.
They are beloved. It's crazy. I think it's more so than any other team.
Right.
It's just like
the Mike Piazza home run,
Piazza, Edgardo Alfonso. These guys, somebody who, even players that didn't have these stellar careers, if you do something great as a Met, you are just like marked your place in history. People will love you forever.
Your ticket is punched.
Yeah.
But remember the Jets teams remember the New York Stock Exchange?
Oh yeah.
Like Gastineau,
Marty Lyon, Gastineau,
Klecko, and Abdul Salam. And I think like collectively, if you look at in my mind, these guys were like there were posters and they were like going to Wall Street and taking these pictures with their shirt, the football jerseys and all the stock trade, like all this stuff. But when you look at like the actual statistics, it wasn't the greatest. Like it wasn't the greatest group. The team wasn't that great, but it wasn't like they all had like
we won games though.
Yeah, But I remember in the Gastineau dance, and he was one of the first kind of showboaty. Like it wasn't done in the NFL what he was doing. Like he would sack someone and kind of have this fist pump and now it seems incredibly tame relative to the whole pantomime things. All the celebrity stuff and all like the golf swings and the rifle shooting in the air and stuff.
Right, because they banned all that stuff for a while.
And didn't Joe Klecko's son play at? Joe Klecko played at Temple, and I remember thinking like, Temple, what the hell kind of school is that? Like playing Temple alum. Right. I just didn't know what that meant. Is that like a synagogue Temple? Like is that a real school? No, then I realized it was a school. Yeah, it's in Philadelphia. And they used to play at Veterans Stadium to like bands of 40 people would show up. I mean, they were a very bad team, the Temple Owls.
I like the idea of like
NFL players have come from there though.
Someone playing for a lesser school, but they're just so good.
Yeah, and Klecko really came. But I think Joe Klecko, like and you look at these guys now, like in terms of their stature, like someone like Howie Long too. Like for when he played, he was like this monster. But when you see him on a Skechers commercial, he looks like a pretty slight compared to these people today that are playing football.
They kind of get deflated.
Yeah, they kind of come down. It's the steroids. But I mean, you look at defensive linemen that are 6'8" that can run faster than you. Like these guys are unbelievable, and I think that the the era of like kind of normal guys kind of playing football, like way gone. Like you have to be a total physical specimen, it seems.
Yeah.
I mean, there are
they still need on the D line. You still need those bulky sumo wrestler guys. I mean, I don't think that.
And there's really no statistics for them just taking up space and causing havoc for other people. Like
just being
those guys
immovable.
Those guys don't have a lot of tackles or a lot of stats. They just kind of create a barrier to let people go other places.
They're just hard to move.
Yeah, hard
unless
to move.
they're jets,
hard to handle, easier to hold. Jets are a little easier to move.
I remember going to when we would go to Hofstra to watch the Jets practice. One of the big appeals of it for me was taking pictures. I wish I still had all these pictures, but I vividly remember, like, so people would kind of wait as they were walking up. Right. Abdul Salam, he was, I don't know if he was like 6'1", he was like this big, huge man. Yeah. And someone handing him like this little baby, and he's like he's got it in his hand, his one hand. He's like holding the baby.
I remember my favorite Jet moment when I used to go to, me and my dad would go to games. We like borrowed or shared season tickets at one point throughout the 80s. And I remember I went to a game, and I have to look this up, but the end of the game, the team, and I swear to God it was the Giants, but the Giants were lined up to kick a field goal to win the game. I think the game might have been tied or something like that. Field goal gets blocked, and the Jets run it back for a touchdown and win the game like at the last second.
Right.
And I'm going to look this up later to kind of footnote this, but I remember just like the euphoria. And I also remember another really interesting memory, all the Dolphins games that I would go to, because my dad would yell, "Fish fans, look at the fish," because there was always a lot of Dolphins fans at Jet home games.
That was his heckle?
The fish, he doesn't even call them the Dolphins, he calls them the fish.
The fish.
The fish.
Okay.
But there was I remember going, it was in '86, after Game 6 of the World Series, which was on, I think, a Saturday night. The Mets had won the World Series. I won Game 6 of the World Series, the unbelievable. We won't even get into. That's a whole nother podcast of Game 6 of where were you and how did it affect you. But anyway, Game 7 was a Sunday night, and I went to the Jet game during the day. That Sunday, it was a 1 o'clock game. I don't remember who they were playing, but I remember everyone in the stands, and we were always upstairs, but it was packed because the Jets were sold out for like decades. Like you couldn't get a Jets ticket. I was on the list for 20 years.
Yeah.
And when my name finally came up, it was the Brett Favre year. And I did it. I bought into season tickets, and I vowed never again. I did it for one season. It was ridiculous. Yeah. But getting back to 1986, what I remember in the crowd was there was just so much like palpable excitement about going home to watch Game 7 that night. And you knew they were going to win. Like, you just kind of knew. And they were losing like 4-2. I mean, I remember Sid Fernandez came in the middle of the game to kind of like, stop the fire. The old number 50, Sid Fernandez for the Hawaiian, that number 50 for the state of Hawaii. He was a big guy. But somehow he came in to kind of like stop the fire. And then Ray Knight maybe hit. I forget how Game 7 actually. Yeah. It's kind of like the hockey, like the Miracle on Ice. Everyone remembers the Russian game, but no one. That wasn't the final game. That was the semifinals.
No.
They beat Finland 4-2, and no one remembers that game so much. Right. But yeah, Game 6 I remember so intently. But Game 7 I remember them lose. They were losing 4-2 or something like that. Right. And I remember that. I don't remember a lot about what that felt like or watching that game. I just remember a few things about that game.
Back when, it seems hard to... I can't remember when we had multiple good teams at the same time.
It's 88, too, is the other one.
Yeah, it's just like, it's so rare.
Well, 84, they were dealing with the Cubs, and 85, it was the Cardinals.
Right.
And then it was always like they had good teams, and you knew they were going to break through. And again, in 84, they got hit up. I think it was the Cubs, and I think it was the Cardinals in 85. Because I remember those Cardinal teams, they were so... It was like Lonnie Smith and Coleman, and like... It was kind of like, they'd get up to bat. I was like, this is so unfair. Like, anywhere they hit the ball, these guys are so fast. They're going to get on. And they were just like, this whole thing about speed on the base paths was just like so intimidating. I remember.
The olden days. Right? Yeah.
Speed, and actually speed and small ball stuff. Like, bunting. And kind of the way, I remember thinking that way when the Yankees were dealing with like Ichiro, and he was on, I think they played, the Yankees... Maybe in the early 2000s, we had some playoff series. I think 3 or 4 with they stuffed, the Mariners. But Ichiro, I just remember thinking about how there's no way to stop this guy. Like, this guy's like, he's gonna foul the ball for 15 pitches, and dink and dunk and get it. It's like
I love small ball.
Yeah, he's still playing. He has a contract.
He's still playing, but you
I
know,
mean,
and
they're kind of letting
the question
is
like, I know, should he
he's
retire? I think he is over
like
3,000 hits and stuff.
But when you add the Japanese hits, he has more than Pete Rose. But like, there's all this thing about you can't really add. Because remember when he was the rookie of the year, but he had like 10 years of experience. Like, there was a big controversy about that. And very kind of racial too. I think it was very kind of like this foreigner and Japanese and this whole thing about
finally accepting that there were really exceptional Japanese players. And guess what? They're gonna come play here now. Yeah, I know. He was. I don't like seeing these guys who've had these really esteemed, amazing careers. Like, we were just talking about this.
Of going to Japan?
Coming here and then in the twilight years, kind of bouncing around from team to team. Because I always think, people are going to see him, and I always worry that people are going to forget how great this player was.
An American player?
No, any player who kind of is in the twilight of their career. We talked about Willie Mays, like ending up with the Mets and not being a stellar player.
Well, I've always had this idea of creating a book that somehow documents or pictures those pictures of like Patrick Ewing in the Sonics uniform,
disconcerting.
Like Joe Namath playing for the Rams. And the other day we found this, and
even freaking O.J. Simpson. Who did he? He like got traded
from the Bills.
Yeah, he played for somebody else.
But we found the other day the most amazing thing, and neither Hope or I knew about this. And man, if anyone out here knows about this, I'd be really impressed. Yogi Berra was a coach on the '86 Astros.
Right. In the uniform.
And you can see him in that crazy, crazy uniform.
It's really disconcerting. And he was with them for a couple of years. I had no recollection of this.
I didn't. We were talking, we started the conversation today about Tom Seaver, the unfortunate news with he has, some dementia, and he's kind of pulling away from public life. And Hope and I started talking about him as a player and as as this like Iron Man in terms of innings, and then you start thinking about like so we saw that he had been traded around a bunch, and we were looking at like what he was on the '86 Red Sox, but I'm not sure he was on the playoff roster because he didn't pitch in the playoffs. But we were just trying to figure out more about his career and where he had played. But you thinking O.J. Simpson was traded?
He played for the Niners. Did you know that?
Really?
Yeah. I didn't remember that.
Don't remember that
We're not going to get into that guy.
No. I do remember the best O.J., and I wasn't there, obviously, but, when he broke the rushing record, it was at Shea.
Oh, right, it's at Shea.
And there's all footage of this.
Everybody has their greatest career achievement at Shea. And any baseball fan will know that, Chipper Jones, who I cannot stand, Braves, Hall of Famer, or whatever, he named his son Shea deliberately as a dig because he's like, I've had so many good days there of kicking our ass, kicking the Mets' ass. But yeah.
And you remember that? I remember the apple that would come out of the top hat when he hit a home run, and I forget what year that started.
I know,
but they kept that going for a long time.
They had this is so typically Mets, late '70s. They had a mascot. It was a mule. Okay,
I don't remember.
A donkey, and it was named Mettle, Mettle, because
in addition
Mettle.
To Mr. Met,
get it, everybody?
In addition to Mr. Met,
yeah, it was.
Do you remember the series of ESPN commercials that were using Mr. Met? There was a series of ESPN commercials maybe 10 to 15 years ago that were using Mr. Met in the commercial.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, when he was like, hey, Mr. Met, I heard your wife was seeing the... Yeah. And he has that look on its face was just kind of the punchline.
Mr. Met, the most maligned mascot. But, in fact, now they still walk around the stands, and then they do that horrible, like the seventh inning now, they'll take out the T-shirt guns.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll shoot up these extra large wrinkled T-shirts to everybody.
I've never caught a T-shirt or a foul ball in the stands. I've never caught
this is the thing. Remember, you'd go to a game, you'd bring your mitt, and be like, I'm going to get a foul ball. But I'll tell you something. A couple of years ago, sitting in box seats with a friend of mine, ball came, they come back fast, and it scared the hell out of me. Did
it rattle around on the floor for a while?
This guy in front caught it, but it was coming back so fast, I was like, you know what, screw foul ball. I'm prepared to duck.
I remember when in the 70s, my dad took me to it was like 77 or 78. We went to a day-night doubleheader of the Mets in Pittsburgh. Ugh. So we get there, and I hadn't been to many baseball games. I was probably 8 or 9, and what I don't remember specifically, but he always tells the story. But so this is a day-night doubleheader, and you're there for. I mean, that's like
I used to like
long
those.
time. And this isn't like today. They kind of they don't have doubleheaders anymore, or they charge you twice or whatever.
Right.
But by the second inning, I was asking him when we were going to leave because I was so bored. And I also remember at that game, they had those little ice cream cups with the wooden spoon. The chocolate and vanilla. And I remember I was so terrified of a foul ball coming up and hitting me that I would only look down and eat my ice cream when there wasn't action going on, because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't, and I had my mitt with me too. And the closest I ever came, the Mets used to play this Mayor's Trophy game against the Yankees at the All-Star break, I believe. And it's unbelievably hard to find information about this, and it only happened for a few years, and it was way
the
before
70s,
early 80s maybe,
because they were definitely doing it like in the Jimmy Fund in the very late 70s, because I remember they didn't televise those games either.
It's hard to find, and I remember, and it was before interleague play, so it was like a real big deal, like the Mets playing the Yankees. It was really cool. I remember I was sitting behind home plate, but really high up. Dave Winfield fouled one back. And we were at the rail, and I remember reaching over the rail with my mitt, and I can still see the ball, and I can still see the stitching on the ball to this day. But it was beyond my reach. And you know what else we've also talked about? There was 2 years in 74 and 75 when Yankee Stadium was being renovated.
I remember that really well.
For the 76 season. So the Yankees played.
They played at Shea. I saw
and there is so little footage of the Yankees playing at Shea as the home team. It's like they've expunged the record. It's all been redacted.
Yep.
I think, and the best players in that team was like Bobby Mercer, and this was kind of like
it was great.
It was a dark era. It was a dark era
they
after
were not
the late '60s. The late '60s stuff. I think they were in the series in '67 or '68.
Yeah.
Then there were some dark moments.
Yeah, the Yankees of the whole first half of the '70s. Yeah, it was even like late '60s.
I think that's when Steinbrenner bought it in the early '70s, right? He bought it from who owned it before him, like some shipping company or something, or Gulf West Turner.
When you would get like yearbooks, they would just have a picture of some old man at the front. Be like, I guess that's the guy that owns the team.
Or when the Mets that had Joan Payson, and
that old lady with the red hair.
Like Lucille
God bless her. But the
Yankees at Shea for 2 years.
They played at Shea. I saw a Yankee old timer game at Shea. I think I told you.
Oh yeah.
And I told you, Casey Stengel, if any vintage baseball fan. He was old even when I was little, okay? I think when he coached them in the 20s or something. Yeah. And back then, all the old timers, they would have them dressed in baseball uniforms.
Yeah.
And he was wearing like one of those, they look like, the really baggy bottoms. Yeah, they kind of just sort of. And when he came, that's like, ladies and gentlemen, Casey Stengel. And he came out and he walked like a gorilla, like deliberately out to the pitcher's mound. I remember it really vividly.
What number was he again? And this is
he was number 1.
No, it wasn't Billy.
37. He was number 37.
Yeah, because they didn't retire number 1 a couple times, like Billy Martin.
Casey was 37. Yeah. Casey was the one who even when he was managing the Mets in the 60s would make fun of them deliberately.
And some of the great lines, like some of the great, I can't remember any now, but some incredible, look up some Casey Stengel.
Well, yeah. The one thing he said was every baby's first word was Metsy. He's like, when a baby, the babies are born, they say Metsy.
Oh, that was like a press conference, right? Like he was getting all excited about them.
But he would say the most cutting thing. Because, the first Mets team, they just got all the cast-offs from
they were 40 and 120. Awful. I remember that or 40 and 100, because they only played 160. They didn't play 162 yet. Right. They only played 160, I think, at that point. Or no, they played 152. They were their first record. Yeah, there was like before the schedule got to 162, and I think 162 happened when they had the expansion era. So before the expansion stuff in the late 60s, they played fewer games. I want to say there were 40 and I keep thinking 40 and 120, but that adds to 160, and that's not right. It's sort of it's bad. It's still the worst. It's still the worst. Yeah,
it's
record.
bad, but they really had nothing to utilize. Everybody was over the hill. Yeah. Everybody, or they were just were. Well, no, there were a couple minor league.
Wasn't there a good pitcher like Ralph? Was Ralph Houck on the team, or there was someone who was like had actually a couple wins, or one guy.
Well, they had
most
this
of the
guy
wins.
Ron Hunt, and his claim to fame was being the guy who got hit by those pitches in history of Major League Baseball. So they never had. And back then too, I think they were still doing that thing where there was one representative from every team on the All-Star team. So I think they were still...
Well, they still do that now, where each team gets a player, and then they vote for all the real good guys. But I think everyone's still... I think they still do that. There's still at least one player, like...
As a Met fan, I can tell you, we had many years with just one representative, and usually wasn't because they were having a good season.
And these guys didn't want to do it because they had 4 days off, and it's like, oh, crap, now I got to go to the All-Star game and sit on the bench. And
Right.
I mean, maybe it was George Foster for the early 80s.
Like Mazilli playing in one, and I think he walked in a run, or they walked him. And he,
Adam, if Adam Verabauer's listening, Lee Mazilli All-Star game statistics, he walked in a run.
Lee Mazilli was he was such a superstar, such a heartthrob. He was Chachi. He wore the tightest uniform, although 16, he used to say his thing was my uniform's not the tightest. Look at Elliot Maddox. His uniform's way tighter than mine. I literally saw an interview where he said that.
Wasn't number 16?
They had this, it was number 16. He had the part in the middle of the feathered hair.
Scott Baio look. I mean, he was...
And there were signs back when the Mets were really trying to get people interested in the team again. So in the subway and the buses and stuff, there were these ads where the slogan was "The magic is back."
Yeah.
Okay. And there was a picture of Lee Mazzilli's face. And it said, "Come see what a kid from Brooklyn can do in Queens." And I thought to myself, a kid from Brooklyn can do it? What do you mean, mug somebody?
Yeah, get on the bus.
Use the old word mug. I mean, and Lee, the other thing was every year the Mets would have something called Photo Day, Camera Day.
Yeah.
And that was a big day for me.
Was that the parade day, Banner Day?
No,
Banner
it's completely separate. Camera Day, they let you on the field. They kind of had a blockade around the side, and you could take pictures. The Met players would walk around and pose. They were all walking around and posing, just loose, Lee Mazzilli had 2 police officers with him to guard him because he was a superstar. Everybody wanted a piece of Lee. It seems really funny now. I think he had one good year. He looks like an extra on The Sopranos now. But yeah,
I haven't seen him. Again, my friend Adam posted a picture of him as a child with Lee, and then him as an adult with Lee.
Yeah, but Lee was.
But I remember every year the marketing tagline that would be in the subway or on the yearbook was just always more laughable than the year before, come and get it, or
I know,
the magic is back, or this time we're serious, or but every year there was
we really mean it this time.
There was a new give us a try, why not,
go back to Shea.
I know. Always these hopeful, and I got the yearbook every year. I remember looking at the back of the yearbook, and it would have the team and the extended team, and then they would have all the new guys up and coming, and I remember Darryl Strawberry and Doc Gooden, and you started seeing and hearing about. But
there were also things like people like Dave Shinek. That's a vivid one for me. When we were just gonna, speaking of the yearbook and my very first Met game, it was the Mets versus the Braves, and this was a chain. It was a rainy day, and the kids at school were like, "Oh, looks like your game's gonna be rained out." But I was so excited to finally be going to a game. Yeah. And we get there, and it is rainy and stuff, but I was so excited. I got my yearbook and everything, and I went on my quest for autographs straight away, and it was pretty empty.
Now, what would that look like? Getting down as far as you can get to the field and just leaning over the rail?
Right. But that day, this is so great. It was rainy. There were only 3 other people there, because I guess everybody thought the game was going to be rained out. And the first autograph I ever got, well, basically, okay, so we saw this, I think he was a relief pitcher. His name was Phil Hennigan, right? And these guys next to people, and these older kids are like, Phil! And he turned around and he just kind of ignored us, right? There's nobody there, right? Next person we see, freaking Tom Seaver, legendary Tom Seaver, and he came right over to us and signed it. So I always thought, wow, Phil Hennigan, where are you today? Tom, because we were just talking about Tom Seaver and what's happening with him lately, and just how.
Do you remember the planes that would fly over Shea? It was they changed the flight path, but I remember the plane would actually come over, and you could see it.
It was like a shadow.
Yeah, you could see that, and it was almost in 3-dimensional. It was so crazy to see this plane kind of coming down but turning at the same time. And I remember my dad was always like, I like Rusty Staub. Because a lot of the batters would step out of the batter's box.
Right.
But Rusty Staub would stay in the batter's box and demand to be pitched to, because his theory was when he hits, because the outfielders go by the sound. Like if it's hit hard or hit easy, the outfielders use the sound in terms of tracking the ball. And my dad said that Rusty Staub said that he liked to hit when it was when the outfielders couldn't hear it, so they couldn't track the ball. It was like Rusty Staub, another.
This is how you know the Mets were such a second-tier team, right? Freaking planes flew over that stadium for what, 15 years?
Yeah, they changed the flight path like recently.
So when you were there, I mean, like it was inevitable that was going to happen.
I used to like watching the planes. I used to like looking at the tail. Like, oh, that's American Airlines, and that's Delta.
Ridiculous, yeah. But that's such a typical Mets thing.
Right. And we talked about it last time, the running around, because after you get bored after the third or fourth inning, and if you were there with your friends that your team and dad took you, then it's like starting to run around the ramps, and those ramps that went up and down. And the cool thing about, and as an architect, I don't know how this affected me, but I remember because the stadium was kind of like exposed, right? The stadium was kind of like, it wasn't like closed off in a way. You know, it was all kind of indoor-outdoor space is what I like to call it. There was no like, when you were waiting for, when you were on the halls or on the ramps inside the stadium, you were still kind of outside because it wasn't closed off. It was those plexiglass kind of square things, but there was no way.
You were outside.
You were outside. So running around those ramps, you can like look up, and when you're under, where the bathrooms are, I remember looking up and seeing, the exposed floor and all the pipes that came down, and being like kind of mesmerized by like the inner structure of what you're seeing, which I thought was kind of cool. That didn't lead me to become an architect, but I remember thinking, like being like entranced
only in terms of like, God, I can do better than this.
Or just being able to see, like, when you're an 8-year-old, when you use the bathroom, like you don't know where that goes or what that looks like, or there's water coming into the toilet and there's water going out of the toilet. But I remember thinking like all these systems that were pretty, and like you see all the pipes that were like routed and all the electrical stuff, and I was just kind of really mesmerized. I still remember running around the stadium, and I also remember I used to collect those batting helmets, the plastic batting helmets.
Yeah.
They weren't useful for anything. You couldn't use them in baseball and Little League games or anything because they weren't protective.
Yeah.
They had that like...
They were decorative.
They were decorative helmets. And you had the small ones with the ice cream in it. But I like the big ones. And I remember I collected like 7 or 8 of them, like a Red Sox one, and I like collecting them. But I don't know where they went. But I still have in my basement, well, I'll say this, basement of my parents' house, who just moved to Florida, boxes of old Mets memorabilia, and it was like I even got 6 packs of Royal Crown, aka RC Cola, like full 6 packs of, because
there was a time they were doing pictures of people's faces.
But when they won the World Series, they made a special version of it, and then years later when I went and tried to find these cans in the basement, they were all empty. But there weren't any leaks, and the tops weren't open. It was like after 30 years, the soda kind of like evaporated or something.
It goes back up to heaven.
It just goes back to. But I remember getting all these pennants. I was just so into it. I mean, into like the Mets. I just was, because my dad was from the Bronx, and I think that in his generation, he grew up in the '60s. And it was kind of a rejection of the Yankees because everyone liked the Yankees. Well, he was into the Mets. It was like different. And that's how
everybody wants to have their own kind of thing, kind of different than. And
then, of course, since he decided he was a Jets and Mets fan, then therefore my lot in life was set.
Yeah.
Whereas my son has determined that he, maybe he's going to be a Seattle Seahawks fan because of the internet, and you can see all these things. But back then,
I just can't.
You really couldn't.
I do not.
And I remember, like, every year when me and my son do, because my son's really into watching football, and he's, he's getting ready to go to college this year, so we've watched our last NFL game together, which is, kind of sad, but it's part of life, and he was actually into the Sam Darnold thing, and he's kind of giving the Jets another chance, and he's thinking about it. He's like,
as he should be.
He's like, these are some good moves. But every year when they have the draft, there's always that famous, like, there's this famous clip or a video montage on YouTube about, it basically goes through all the Jets draft picks as like, like
that's a painful,
and it just does like little snips of each, and it shows the crowd, the Jets fans like screaming. It's like Radio City Music Hall, like no, and the whole Ken O'Brien thing, like whoever the GM at the time was, we think
Mark Sanchez.
We think Ken O'Brien has a real upside, when they passed Marino and they didn't pick Elway.
Genius move.
Yeah. I saw Dan Marino play in college. I saw him play at Pitt. We used to go to Army West Point football games when I was a kid, so we saw Dan Marino play against Army, and he was amazing. But yeah, the Jets, I think with Sam Darnold, I like him a lot. He did some really good things this year. They didn't force the issue with him. They kind of kept him on a shorter leash, you know. And
but he got to play, and I think that once he gets surrounded by some parts, and
he has a good mentality.
Sure, we've got a new crazy eye coach, but you know.
But his first pass in the NFL was a pick six, and I'm like, oh my God, here we go. But
that's okay.
They won that game, and I remember what always struck me about him, and when he came off the field, after that happened, which is arguably the worst starting. You know, anything that can happen in your career, that's the worst thing that can happen. You come out your first pass, you throw an interception for a touchdown. First thing. You know, in my mind, my Jets, you know, sensibilities start to kick in, like, here we go again. But I remember when he ran off the field and he took his helmet off and the coaches talked to him and he didn't have a smile on his face, but it was just like, you know, he wasn't upset about it. Like, it was gone. It was done. You know, it was like, and they ended up winning that game. And I remember, you know, thinking about, you know, sometimes I was a youth lacrosse coach for many years. We would talk about a kid who would be a goalie, for instance, and you know, any kind of goal or any kind of position like that, you have to like let it go. Like the ball that went past you to score a goal or whatever just happened bad, it's not going to keep happening, right? So you have to like psychologically, and you know, in lacrosse, as a goalie, even the best goalie is going to let in 10 goals a game, and you have to get past it. And some kids can do that really well, and some kids would get all upset and really kind of down. You can tell by their body language, but some kids are like, oh, let's just go.
Right.
And it's the kid that can get past that. And I saw that in Sam Darnold this year. There were some pretty stupid interceptions. I mean, he's like a 21-year-old kid. He's 3 years older than my son. I mean, it's like kind of crazy. And I'm okay with the mistakes because it's constructive. I'm okay with like the learning from mistakes.
Right.
But I remember all the times I would really watch him when he came off on TV, really watch him, you know, regarding after bad things happen. And just a really good demeanor, and just like a real calm, you know, looking at coaches, looking them in the eye when they were saying, okay, don't throw it to the guy in the red uniform, it's the green uniform, you know, whatever they were telling him,
right?
You know, and you know, even times when he would get sacked because you know people would make mistakes, he wasn't, you know, like Ben Roethlisberger, like calling his teammate out and yelling at them on the field. Right. It seemed. I've got hope. I've got some real hope here, and I want to.
Oh no, me too.
I want to listen to this podcast in 10 years after we've won 3 or 4 Super Bowls and look back at this moment.
Me too. I mean, you know what? Just getting a real quarterback. Yeah. I mean, it's been a really long time. It's exciting to me, and I loved Chad Pennington.
I did too. I like Mark Sanchez. I like him. I wanted to like him. I had to like him.
Yeah,
I had no other choice.
In the beginning, you know, it was like, okay, yeah.
But Pennington was great. I mean, he was fantastic.
He just reminds me of that kid, like you talk about the kid who just kind of brushed it off. No matter what happened, you'd be like, come on, let's go, everybody. He was very much that guy. Yeah. And I appreciated that. So when we lost him, it was very bittersweet. Even though I know he was on the way down.
It was injury stuff, right?
Yeah, and then he went to Miami, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, you know, let's go to our mortal enemy, but still, there was something endearing about him and just the way he played. I really, really appreciated.
Well, cool. So I guess we've talked for so long. This might be the entire episode of another podcast episode, which is great. Hope and I again share a similar window of geography and time relative to sports, which no one else in the shop shares.
That's right. We share the same birth defect, which is we had no choice but to like the Mets.
And we try to making the best with what we've been given, like making the best about what.
Yeah, I'll stand tall with that, you know. And it's funny because from a political standpoint, people who aren't from here sort of know to kind of gravitate towards the Mets, you know, like that's the proper team.
Well, the Yankees are just like such a, like, you know, I used to work in a really big architecture firm, and a really big, well-known architecture firm, and you know, people loved them or hated them or whatever, but I would always describe it to people whenever I met someone like, hey, you know, what do you do? And I was, I'm an architect. Where do you work? And I'd say SOM, which was the name of the firm. Very famous, very old firm. And what I was always describe it to, I would describe it as the Yankees of architecture, just because people would know, like, oh, that's the really big firm that like people like and people don't like, but they've like built, like, there's no denying the Yankees' accomplishments.
It
right?
was something. Yeah, it was like the you were at the peak of whatever. If you were like,
and, you know, their brand, their logo is the most recognizable logo in the world. Their brand is incredibly recognizable. And the same thing with this architectural firm. The buildings, everyone knows the buildings, even if you don't know who built them, you know these buildings. But I always describe them in kind of an underhanded compliment as like the Yankees of architecture, which is
But I think what it implies, you know, when you would see somebody with a Yankee hat, you would think, I'm just somebody who wants to be aligned with a winner. You know what I mean?
It's like wearing a MAGA hat.
Whereas, like, if somebody wears a Met hat, you know that they're more troubled just to their core.
Right. It's hard these days when you see people walking around with hats because it's so interchangeable. Everything is so, you can buy everything anywhere. You can buy everything online. I could walk around with like a Kansas City Royals hat and like no one would care. No one would ask me. But yeah, I think that there are signals that, I was reading something about like, everything you wear sends a signal about you. And the hat that you wear, right now I'm wearing a salsa camouflaged bicycle hat. So, hey, we talked about bikes. This is the Bike Chef Radio. We mentioned bikes in this podcast. But yeah, I don't think I own a Yankee hat. I wouldn't like burn one or not wear one if I had one.
Really? I wouldn't. I will say this. The thing is, like, if you were walking down the street wearing a Met hat, when we stumbled into the World Series a few years ago that we didn't deserve to be in, I remember, like, I have a Met hat. I have a black Met hat now.
I know that hat. It's like the giant. It almost looks like a giant hat, right? Like an old New York Giants hat.
Wearing it the next day, thinking somehow it's like, I'm in New York City. Am I going to see people with Met hats? Didn't, except for one guy on the subway, and I was coming up the stairs, and he had a Met hat on too. And he came down to Mets. Was like, "Let's go Mets!"
That's one of the greatest sports cheers and chants ever. Let's go Mets!
And I was like, "That's right, man. Let's go Mets!" Okay.
Well, you remember when the Red Sox were getting good and won it in 2004? Every Red Sox fan, everyone had like the beat up Red Sox hat. Like, I've been a fan forever. We were joking that like you had to go and buy your beat up Red Sox hat at the store. Like, no one ever has a new Red Sox hat. It's always battle worn and ripped, and look how long I've been a fan and all this kind of stuff. But I remember in 2004 it was always the beat up hat. There wasn't any new Red Sox hats.
I think with stuff like that, and as a Mets fan, I can say this: I am more than happy to welcome anybody to the Met family. I don't care if you've been a fan since 1962 or 2018. Like I say,
welcome.
Come in and sit with us. Totally cool.
There's room at the table.
There's no elitism as far as being a Met fan. We're all losers, and let's all be losers together, man.
Just like Jets fans.
No problem. That's always weird to me when people want to take that, or when people were wearing those Yankees 27. They won all these championships, and the comeback was always like, 1950s and 1920s maybe, and all the meaningless ones, I guess, in the was it later 1990s and 2000s, where people can't remember any of the things that happened in the game. Who cares? Who cares?
Well, the Jets too, undefeated. There aren't too many undefeated Super Bowl teams.
That's
the Ravens. I think the Jets. So we went through this out with a friend online. Jets undefeated. They get there and they win it.
One
they only
for one, baby.
But
it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
I don't know.
Mark it here, people. Jets are gonna win the Super Bowl before planet Earth explodes.
All right. Well, today is a real rainy day, and we had some fun talking. And thanks for listening. And we'll get back to you guys real soon.